Hey, Brittany, this is Mark.
Hey Mark, how's it going?
Pretty good. Trying to figure out. Oh, I know why I'm dark. No camera on. That'll do.
Stranger? Hi. Well, I'm super excited. I'm first. Here's my cat. This is Tiger. He's oftentimes just joining me in my lap, and he's like a human person cat thing. So we'll probably throw him off 3 or 4 times in the next hour. I'm Britney Cole. My current role is the Chief Innovation Officer at Blanchard, um, formerly the Ken Blanchard Company. So that's the I work for the family and the 1 minute manager, and Ken is still alive and kicking. And we have our all company meeting next week, and it'll be wonderful to hear from him and Margie. And really, he, sort of operates not in the business, but as part of the owner group. And I've been at Blanchard for 5.5 years. I'm located in Minnesota, and our headquarters are in Southern California, north of San Diego. And my job at Blanchard, even though that's my title, every year I've had the pleasure to, as I've come into the organization, reinvent a different part of their business and then scale it in such a way where we've been able to experience really amazing growth since 2019, even despite COVID. And I'll actually talk a little bit about how COVID accelerated a lot of the work that we began with our customers and with our clients. And then prior to that, Scott and I were coworkers for a period of time. I worked at GP Strategies, so I've been in custom learning my pretty much my entire career. I'm an engineer by trade and went into sales, which I think has helped my on the consulting side. And while at GP, I worked across the entire vertical of learning and development, got to work with clients like Comcast and MetLife at the large organizational level, like even having some fractional type roles in sort of program management for different verticals, and kind of found myself into leadership development, which has been personally a massive transformation. And working for a company like Blanchard, I drink the Kool-Aid, and it's been a really lovely place to sort of land my career, and a privilege to do what I do each day. So I'm excited to share what Scott asked me to do. I kind of created a deck from scratch. It's not like one of my, hey, like standard keynotes I do for our clients. And so I'm like, so I'll share my screen in a bit, but it was really interesting of the question that you asked of like, how has Blanchard as a company changed? And I'll sort of talk through a little bit of some of the things we've done together and where they are today, and where I hope to see them, see the company continue to blossom. And then, if we have time, I'll talk through some of the challenges, because there's, it's growth is challenging and change is challenging, and our employees sometimes are like, "Can we be done with change?" And we're like, "No, there's more coming." So I'll chat about that too. All right, so with that, I'll share my screen. I have a lot, and part of the reason why I have a lot is I'll share this with you. My screen's over here. I'll put on chat, so please put in like questions. It's nice that we're small enough too, so you just raise your hand and we can pause. But at least you'll have kind of everything from soup to nuts, and then we can even like dial in a couple things as we go. So see my screen, the Blanchard one? Okay, so that's me. You got that. So these are the kind of the three things that sort of Scott, you asked, like what are we doing over the past decade? How does that translate into what we believe modernizes leadership development? And you might be a little surprised at what I say. And then some key takeaways. So I actually like put in some like embedded different tools and things that we're using with our clients to move away from a content first to more of a human first, human centric perspective, which is different in the leadership development space, where primarily we throw content at you, and then we wonder why nothing ever happened. So, so before I even get to what has changed, I actually want to talk a little bit about Blanchard and what hasn't changed. And so one, I actually pulled this out of our capabilities deck. And at Blanchard, we are a company of frameworks. So our most popular one is SL2, better known it more affectionately as situational leadership 2. But primarily, if you think of and you take it all away, everything we do is based on a mental model or framework. And I will share with you, coming from the custom space into the framework space, I was skeptical. I'm like, oh, I build this stuff all the time. I built leadership development for the largest companies. And I will say a really key aha moment for me is using frameworks versus, say, leadership principles has been a key component, of Blanchard's success over 40 years. It's one of the reasons why I believe Blanchard is still around today, is that it leverages its simple lessons, mental models that people can then go learn from and then go do. And despite everything with technology, and we'll talk about how Blanchard is solving for the integration of technology and the key challenges we're finding from our clients, is that everything still comes back to having conversations with people. So even decisions that we make around who we partner with are influenced by, does this promote having good conversations? So shorter form content versus longer form e-learning influences how we design, because we want people to go have conversations because we believe that connection, when they build trust, that really ignites people and people succeed. So we're still a conversation company, and using a variety of different frameworks. And I'll actually share how many we have. SL2 is still our most common, and we're rolling out more. And it's been interesting because I find that sometimes the models are so simple that our clients are like, well, we already get that. And I'm like, really? You believe that you have an organization that trusts your senior leaders? And so what we're finding, and what I'll share, is it's not often teaching the model, because the models are pretty simple. It's applying the frameworks in practice and in context. Context is key. So we'll talk. So one of the tools I'll share is, how do we derive context at Blanchard without feeling we have to reinvent the wheel every time? And I think that's actually probably one of the biggest keys to why we've been able to scale the way we've been. So that's really what hasn't changed. We've been around for 44 years. We have a global footprint. Our global footprint is in part by the corporate entity, but we actually have a really large partner network. So even, I think Marlee, you said you're a coach. Most of our coaches are associates who coach and represent Blanchard. A lot of the organizations globally are actually, like, I'm not gonna use the word, it's not an actual franchise by legal definition, but they license the Blanchard name and represent us globally. And so even as we talk about scale, it's a combination of different strategies around the evolution of, if you think of like any good book, even like Marcus Buckingham's new book, Love and Work, which I love, he's like, okay, great, I have this awesome book. It's hitting a chord with people and organizations. Now what do I do with it? I'm keynoting. Great. But how does he scale that? And so we are seeing with organizations that might be smaller consulting firms or an author, what are the parts of how you actually scale your solutions, because an individual isn't scalable. And I will also share this story. It was revolutionary for Ken Blanchard 44 years ago to have his model and then let other people teach his model and then teach them how to teach the model. That's actually something that authors still struggle with today, of letting go of their models and frameworks and then letting the the framework or the principles or whatever their intellectual property is speak for themselves. So that was new 44 years ago, and still in a lot of organizations we see grapple with scale of what they struggle with today. So that's what hasn't changed. But what has is, and again, there's 1,000 things. We kind of just identified 3 trends, a couple challenges, is remote and hybrid work. Remote with COVID, now moving people back to the office, that hybrid work environment, how, before COVID, Blanchard, and I'll share this in a little bit more in detail, but prior to COVID, Blanchard delivered 95% of their solutions in face-to-face workshops, of which either we put someone on a plane and they went to some place and they did their magic in a 2-day workshop or 3 or whatever it was, or we had a client trainer inside an organization license Blanchard content and deliver it. So high off-the-shelf workshop. And so COVID happened, that entire business went away overnight. And so I'll talk about why we were a little bit lucky, that our product team did and didn't know what they did, and then what we kind of did with it. The use of tech and learning, which interestingly is driven by both the corporate learning function, and our desire to embed that, as opposed to necessarily what the learner wants or needs or desires. So it is rising, but it's sometimes not always driven by the needs of like the end user. And what's really changing, and I'll talk about how we're addressing this, is the workforce dynamic shift. Millennials, which I missed by like 2 months. So like those who were born in 1981 or later, they're 44 years old right now. And the lower end of a millennial is almost 30. That's not early career. That's your second, third job. That's mid-career. They might not be in the C-suite or even at the senior level yet, but they are on track to be. And what millennials and Gen Zs, from our research, we find they want, for the most part, something different in their career. And you're probably seeing that. It's not just generational differences, but it's a fundamental shift in how they view work. And wow. But there's also such an opportunity, because there's a fundamental need for leadership developments. They just don't know what it looks like. They never heard of Blanchard either. They don't know the 1-minute manager. So for us, we're coming into a brand problem. We don't have the book anymore. Nobody knows what the book is, or his books. And the challenges are somewhat ever present. The one is, we say engagement in traditional leadership programs. I'm going to flank that a little bit. I'll actually say the perceived engagement in leadership development programs. Based on our research, you'd be surprised at what you hear people want. They want in-classroom experiences with workbooks where they can fill in words in a workbook. So there's a little bit of a distinct difference from what our buyers want to buy and say they want to buy versus what our learners want. And so I'll talk about how we were trying to bridge that. And then also scalability and personalization. I'll share a little bit about what Blanchard is doing as a company to try to address the personalization issue. And it's also that's a fascinating journey in our AI perspective. So I'll share our perspective on AI. What I will say, and I'll go here and I'll go backwards. When COVID happened at Blanchard, what our product development team did, but they never told anybody about, is they built virtual versions of all of our courses. Again, in 2020, 95% of Blanchard courses were delivered in person. And so when COVID happens, what was interesting, it wasn't, hey, do you have a virtual version of SL2 or virtual version of XYZ? Because we actually had them, believe it or not. They were not used, but our product team had someone who was really passionate about virtual delivery. And so they just designed virtual versions. And so our problem was we didn't have anybody who, and clients didn't have anybody who actually knew how to deliver virtually. So in 2020, while maybe our competitors or while others were converting to virtual, we were luckily just one step ahead and said, hey, now we just have to train you. And so it was trainer enablement. It was learning how to use tools like Zoom and Teams and Adobe Connect and WebEx and whatever they had. And then it was converting. The design work that happened was Teams, which kind of has caught up now, but Teams for a while never had breakout groups. They do now. And so it was almost like designing as these virtual platforms evolved so that now it's a little bit more ubiquitous 5 years later. But 5 years ago, it was somewhat nuanced based on the platform that you were using. And so because of the move from in-person to virtual, what happened at Blanchard was the flywheel changed, because it wasn't just they were asking for virtual instructor-led sessions. They were asking for experiences that wove in live sessions with digital assets and building an experience that happened over time. And so COVID actually for Blanchard allowed the creation of curricula, which for all of us were like, that's probably a big fat duh. Like that's a no-brainer. But for a majority of learning and development teams, especially in the leadership development space, what they were doing was they were doing one of two things. They were either building it themselves and then, like a, a company here in Minnesota that makes like most of the world's salt and sugar and chocolate. Like I remember opening up their book and I'm like, gosh, that looks like SL2. Gosh, that looks like Covey Speed of Trust. That looks like Crucial Conversations. And it was, not, but it was. So one, there's companies that do it themselves and they were kind of using publicly available with IP and kind of clunking it along and making a non-scalable program, or companies were buying, here's our 3 leadership development programs. You had Covey Speed of Trust, you had Blanchard's SL2, and you had Crucial Learnings, Crucial Conversations. And it was kind of like this clunky mix of IP that were either open enrollment courses, or at Blanchard, we do an SL2 rollout, and then the client be like, what else you got? We're like, well, we got coaching essentials. Okay. And then we'd sell that and do those workshops. And then you'd almost like run out of stuff. So at Blanchard, because of COVID, it afforded our design team. So my first job at Blanchard was leading our solution architect team, and we set up our solutions group. Was let's think of learning journeys. What do clients actually want? SL2 solves a lot of needs, sure, but they're not necessarily asking for SL2. They're asking for ways of having a common language of performance. They're asking for ways of how do we provide the right level of direction and support to our employees so they can do better at their jobs. And so if you think of Lego houses, the analogy I've talked about at the company was Blanchard, and a lot of leadership development companies did a really good job at building Lego houses. You buy your Lego set, you put it together, and you have this nice little house, and you put it on the shelf. And then you go buy another one, and then you put it together and you put it on the shelf. But then you never go back and you play with those houses. They just kind of sit there. And so what we did was effectively took all the houses, knocked them down, and put them in a box and say, let's build the right house for the client, leveraging all the individual Lego parts and pieces that worked for that client need. Because Blanchard has about 85 off-the-shelf solutions, and now has been able to take those off-the-shelf solutions and create learning journeys that weave in virtual digital assets, now face-to-face, which is now coming back fairly strongly, and weaving an experience that has a defined beginning, middle, and end, which now can include things like keynotes and speaker series. And then at Blanchard, over the last, going back to like modernizing, what did that open up? That opened up options for content licensing. So now we have clients who license our entire portfolio, and it doesn't matter if they're using, in this part of the business, they're using off-the-shelf workshop A. In this part of the business, they're doing a custom learning journey that's for their sales team. And so it's actually opened up longer, stickier client conversations because it's not just here's a program and we roll it out and you ask what else is new. And so those first three kind of have opened the door for other things. So now the next thing that Blanchard's experimenting with is, well, what about individuals? And moving into sort of the leadership gym, leadership academy model, where people who can't get into cohorts can go into experiences where they can go into, like if I'm a member of the gym, like building trust is this week, or this course is next week. And so it's not building new content necessarily, it's updating content. Our product development team, we're really lucky. And I think we really underscore inside client organizations, and especially like Lisa, you're like, it takes so long to build content. And then when they hire an instructional designer, you're like, yeah, good luck with that. Have fun. And because what it takes to actually build all the pieces and parts of an experience and all the different roles that it probably requires to do that well, as opposed to like one individual who can kind of do it all sort of. So that for us was the biggest leap. The second biggest change for Blanchard was moving from content centric to human centric. And so my background, when I was at GP, I was able to stand up our design thinking practice, and so I brought that over to Blanchard. And it's not novel. I mean, it's something that is for the most part baked in, but a lot of times this is where our clients and this is where our salespeople were starting. We're like, awesome, you have a need. You hear the word trust and they throw building trust, or they hear the word questions and they throw our coaching solutions. And they're probably right to a certain extent, but it was peeling back to say, what about it does that learner, does that segment need? And because oftentimes it maybe wasn't a course, it was just a job aid or a checklist, or it was change management. And so we're pulling them, we pulled our sales teams back from becoming a group of sellers who sell off a menu of 85 solutions to consultative selling. And I will say, have to challenge, that has been really hard to do. And it's really hard to do to this day. So I will say we have not fully cracked that nut in terms of making somewhat transactional sellers, leadership development sellers, people who love people, but maybe don't come from a sales background, to becoming more consultative sellers. That has been a big shift. And we are in year 5 of that. And I would even say still it's something that is going to continually evolve. Okay, I'm going to pause. I still have like a ton more because I just get excited about this stuff. But I'll at least like pause and be like, thoughts, like, is this useful? Is this, I mean, we're small enough where you can be like, this isn't helpful at all. Interesting where I can like dive in. I'll dive into the tech piece.
No, I think it's at the right pace and very fascinating and interesting of how a company that's been around for 44 years is now having to pivot and being proactive on the pivot. That's what I'm kind of hearing already, is you guys were strategic rather than reactive. That's what I'm hearing. What do you have, Holly?
Well, I appreciate everything you've shared so far, Brittany. It's been really helpful. And I was certified situational leadership many, many moons ago. So I have great admiration for Blanchard and the models and frameworks that are part of your process and your product line. But I'm just curious, you may be planning to go into this in a little bit more depth, but you said you were transitioning into more of a consultative selling approach, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if I framed it the way you framed it, but I was just curious what frameworks or models you used for that pivot.
Yeah,
And
great.
yeah, and if what some of the challenges you've had. You spoke briefly about some of the challenges. It's kind of a change of direction, a change of capabilities, if you will. But how have you built that into some of your work that gets transitioned then to the client? Because it's not enough to just use those consultation skills in selling the product, but then I'm sure you want people in the business
Right, you
units
want
when
those
they,
high-end. Yeah,
to be consultants with their clients. So just curious how that's being managed.
yeah, great question. So when I was hired in 2019, my role was called solution architect, and I'm like, I don't know what that is. And what it became really quickly was high-end sales support. So when we hired a handful of people who were in the learning industry for a long time. Jim Irvine, who was the global head of learning at Nissan, and he's our measurement practice lead right now. He's amazing. Jeff Cole out of Canada, another individual, Peter. What we created was, this would have been like 4 years. I mean, I started in 2019, but about 4.5 years ago was bringing on solution architects to ride along our sales team and start to model what consultative selling looked like, partnered selling, of hearing the needs, understanding who, and then recommending a solution that was reflecting back what they asked for. And there was two parts that were challenging. One is our qualifying what is truly an off-the-shelf need, which still exists. Like, that's still a big piece of our business to a certain extent. It used to be 100% for the most part, maybe 95%. Now it's about 50%, 40% are sort of journeys to some degree, or licensing agreements. About 10% is our partner business. And that's pretty significant in 4 years of a shift. And so the solution architect team was the first step. So then they became probably more selling, and they were doing selling and design. So they were in that client for quite a long time. Like, I would say, like, the first fairly large journey client that I was a part of, I was involved for 2 years. And so it was a fairly long ramp down. But then what happened is that individual in the relationship management role was seeing what good looks like. So year one was like, let's test the market to see if we can sell this. And it's kind of pretty like because I came from a company where we did a lot of customization, and so everything we did was in the service of the customer. For me, it was an easy shift to say, these are the types of ideal client profiles who are looking for these types of solutions. So we were able to have customers like Western Digital or Bloomberg, and a handful of others that were sort of these early adopter clients that were willing to go into these sort of virtual multi-month learning journeys across more than one framework. So it wasn't just like and then you have, and I'll kind of show the what's been refined since, but it's the launch session, and then here's some digital, here's a virtual session to go deeper and practice on it. Now here's how we reinforce it. And then let's do that 2 or 3 more times across maybe 3 or 4 frameworks that address a variety of topics. So anyway, so that was sort of stage one. Stage two was actually reorganizing our delivery teams from sales. And then we had like a project manager who was responsible for delivery. And in the past, that was just off-the-shelf workshops. And what was happening was the seller was almost like paired individually with a project manager. And so what was happening was, like, imagine that project manager is a college student. And they had multiple salespeople from multiple regions with different clients. And so they're getting hit on by that seller, and they were unable to prioritize. And they were getting things that were now this new complex that they were not equipped to do. And so year two, so I started 2022, was building customer success teams that potted sales and service together. So then they can take on and start to triage complex and off the shelf. And they were doing it in a way where now I would say that's been a big evolution, Holly, of how we deliver our solutions. It's not one-to-one, but it's almost like a one-to-many, where when we get a new client, because even within clients, we have simple solutions and complex solutions, depending on, say, how large that account is, and who they are. So it's having a full team approach, because every seller doesn't have the same skills. So now we're segmenting sellers to a certain degree. We're modifying how, or making them some are more account managers now versus the ones who are like true sellers, hunters. We're saying, okay, go build greenfields in accounts. So it's almost like restructure our entire sales and delivery service. But having that solution architect role, I have seen over the last at least 4 years, it's slowly eating away at the top of the funnel in the sales process. So our salespeople are better at discovering the right opportunities, and then them being involved in the front end of the engagements, having them elegantly transition off as we build the acumen of our facilitation team.
Yeah, that's helpful. I don't want to belabor my question. My other part was 2 parts, actually. Thank you for that part. I was also curious to what extent you added or integrated the consulting piece, the solution architect competency or capability into situational leadership or some of your new leadership development offerings, because it's been a while since I've been through the training, but I don't remember getting that kind of emphasis, and I'm not trying to bring you in any way. I'm just wondering how it got integrated into how your clients then work with their clients internally. So that was part of the second part of it, but thank you for all of your explanation. That was really helpful.
Yeah, and for that second one, I'll just put a pin in it and I'll highlight it when I get there, because that's actually been a key part of the product team's focus. Is let's not build new frameworks and models. Let's augment those frameworks and models with tools and support to embed on the job, and including measurement at all levels of measurement. So I'll kind of go through some of these. One, even introducing the concept of a persona was new to Blanchard. Thinking again, who are we solving for? I've noticed what I was maybe not expecting, but like pleasantly surprised with a persona. It kind of reminds me of like a coffee table book discussion. It generates a lot of credibility with our buyer, our learning leaders, because it shows that we did a nominal amount of research. Like, again, just like looking up what are open job roles. And it created a better conversation around who you're solving for versus we have 500 leaders across the globe or whatever. Then we're like, okay, well, tell us more about them. Where are they coming from? What are they concerned about? And so even if these have very little accuracy, we find it helps drive precision. And then it helps drive the topic if we have a new leader like Darius or an existing leader like whoever, and we know that both are in the same learning experience. It helps the client think about that there's 2 types of people in the audience that we have to solve for with the same experience, and how do we do that gracefully? So it's more an acknowledgement and awareness to our clients that we're solving for nuance, and it's not just content, because they're going to experience the same content. How might they experience it differently or with each other to grow? And so I'll talk about some of the enablement tools we've built for our design team and for our clients to help get us there. This is our portfolio of stuff that we have. So I have noticed at Blanchard, kind of like, we have people who have been qualified in situational leadership forever, for as long as we've been doing this. And so there's obviously been a lot of work on the product side. SL2 still represents a massive part of our business. So again, for us, it's not, and every model actually ties back to SL2, believe it or not, in the research. And we have like explicit pieces, and that's actually been really helpful, I think, at Blanchard. Is it's not every model sits independently, but how does every model work interoperably? And that's been probably a really fun conversation I've seen, not just from our solution architects, from our trainers, because then it's not, okay, you're doing Covey speed of trust, you're doing Blanchard's SL2, you're doing crucial learnings, conversational capacity, but for the clients we've built trust with and are willing to go a little bit farther and have multi-product, we can then weave in how does building trust, a Blanchard framework, and SL2 and conversational capacity, a Blanchard framework that's authored by Craig Weber. How do those three work together? So how does building trust help you have better conversations around giving direction and support? And then what do you do when it gets sticky? How do you moderate your tendency to minimize and win? And so clients who have sort of gone from off-the-shelf workshop to multi-product. So for us, it's not just innovation in content, but it was innovation in packaging and pricing. That was a big, big change. How do we price in such a way where one SL2 course is $450 a person? It's a lot. And then when you tack on like another framework and another framework, and so for us, it became, and how many additional frameworks is it just free? So like we have a max per person, and so helping our sellers drive stickiness through, we don't care what you use and when. So that was a really big innovation, and then the services that go behind it. So a lot. I talked about learning journeys. So again, I'm putting more in because one, useful. An interesting evolution of learning journeys at Blanchard when I started the department 5 years ago. If you were talking to me or Ann Rollins or Betty Danowitz, who's a solution architect at Blanchard, or Jeff or Peter or Jim, we'd all probably hear the same need and we would design it a little bit differently. It probably would all garner similar outcomes because leadership is not always science, it's art and science. And so under Ann's leadership, who now runs the department, they've done a lot more structure around scalability which makes it easier to deliver. And so to the question, Holly, that you had, this is the framework that team uses. And then there's actually integration tools for each model. So it becomes explicitly, how does SL2, for instance, tie into our strategic imperative? What are, here's the measurement template for level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5 for each model. And so it's templatizing learning journeys, because what we still see inside our client organizations, they are not set up to run multi-touch experiences over the course of time. They can do one-time workshops. So for us, we're building the infrastructure, and then we can say, we can do it. We can hand this over to you and you can go deliver it. But I'm guessing you don't have the project management, the cohort management, the systems in place, or even if you do, like, you don't like them, because who likes workday learning? No one. But we can do it for you, or you do it yourself. So this is what the team has done over the last 2 years of building templates for a journey to drive that context, because it's not just the training. So there's actually been very little done to our products. I mean, SL2 went through a big upgrade in terms of videos and stuff, but in terms of form factor, all this remains. And so things like email communications, launch sessions, integration slides that we have for each model, templates of design sessions. So all the tools I'm going to share with you, like, we bake that in, so those can be done, again, by the client or in partnership with us. On the tech side, this has been fun. So because I had awesome partnerships at my previous company, I was able to bring in a handful of them at Blanchard. And I will tell you, my goal wasn't to like monetize them all. It was just to associate Blanchard with technology so we could build a brand that people would view into as innovative. So I built coalitions with companies like Mobile Coach, Intrepid, Degreed, Mind Tickle, Tailspin, which is now Cornerstone Immerse, to just say, hey, let's do something together. Maybe we're going to lose money on it, which I will tell you we did. But what it did do was it allowed us in RFP presentations with our clients to meet minimum specs. So like our VR simulation, which we built with Tailspin, it's nice. We used intellectual property that we deemed as safe. It wasn't SL2. So we used a model that wasn't as high visible. So if it wasn't like awesome, we're like, nah, that's okay. But it helped us get to market. Another thing we did last year was we became enterprise users of ChatGPT. And so if you were to ask me, what is the single thing at our company that has improved employee productivity? It's that decision. Hands down. And our AI policy is we use AI for everything but content development. We might build derivatives with it based on our content, but we are not building new content. And part of the reason why is we don't want to. We like that our content is built by humans. We like saying that. We believe that that actually provides a value, a unique value proposition. And we get asked in RFPs, is your stuff built by AI? And we can confidently say no, because there is a perceived value of AI content is less valuable now than human generated content.
What's Leadify, the one at the bottom? I'm familiar with probably the other four, but.
Yeah, so Leadify is our newest experiment that launched in October. And that addresses that 1981 to, I don't know, 19 or 2000 and whatever person. So we have seen a significant change in what our buyers want. And so going back to challenges, we have a really excited president. He's Scott Blanchard, or CEO. He's Scott Blanchard. He's Ken's son. I would say, if any of you are familiar with like EOS language, like true visionary, big picture, gets really excited about bright and shiny objects. And in 2022, he partnered with, and I'll say partnered, he purchased put us in a contract with a company called Buildfire that is a mobile app creation company. And because he was like, we need to build an app. And so I look at this contract and I'm like, okay, we just spent a lot of money, but we don't necessarily have an addressable market. So we actually like reverse engineered his purchase and said, where is an audience that we're not solving for right now? And we said, we are not solving for young emerging leaders. And so we took Leadify and kind of said, let's repurpose it. So I'll jump ahead because I actually have a couple slides on it. These are some of our partners. Again, when I say partners, we purchased. We are an Intrepid customer. We deliver a handful of our solutions on Intrepid, which is our collaborative online solutions. We are a customer of Mobile Coach. We have an SL2 chatbot inside our SL2 experience, which is authored on Mobile Coach. We are customers of Credly. We pay money for badges, and we badge at various levels. We are partners of Advantex. We co-built something together. We co-built something with Tailspin. They can sell it, we can sell it. So partners in this space are often nuanced of, did you buy it? Did you do something together? Or are you resellers of it? So that's sort of, we put this on there, and for our clients, it's a little bit nebulous, but again, it's for us, it's brand alignment too, that we're partnering with tech brands that we believe enhance the overall brand of Blanchard, because we have these kind of coalitions, even if they're not necessarily partnerships in that way. So Leadify. Leadify is run by a really small team. I don't know did you ever work with Laura Dollins, Scott, when she was at GP? She is like a creative genius on a side note, and super geek, like probably many of us are. And so this is free. I'll share it with you. You guys can download it. It's on the App Store. It's on Google Play. And so right now it's a free app. It might always be free the more we talk about it. So we have not commercialized. So at Blanchard, going back to like what's changed here, is in the past, everything Blanchard has created, we create for our salespeople to sell. Here's a new workshop to go sell. Here's a new digital something to go sell. And this is this in the Blanchard community, which is, I've shown a previous slide, are two things we built that are not for sale. And one that like blew the mind of our sales team. What do you mean you created something that's not created for me to go sell and make commission on? Like literally broke their, I won't swear, but their freaking minds. Because what we believe and what we hypothesize is we don't have, like maybe we'll release and republish the Woman and Manager, maybe. But even if we did, we believe we need something that speaks to a new generation in a different way. And so we actually created Leadify to solve that. So in Leadify is actually the solution where we're actually bringing in AI. So because we're an enterprise licensed customer of ChatGPT, we get API credits that we can go use in our own solutions. And so we embedded that into Leadify. So Leadify isn't Blanchard content per se, it's Blanchard inspired. And so we're talking about things like time management. We're talking about things like workplace bullying. We're talking about the same topics of things that we sell at Blanchard, but we're teaching in a way that's one, a little bit lighter, more digestible in podcast and short form, and in a way that is that builds thought leadership. And so one of our hypotheses is there's not a lot of means outside of TikTok, which is going away. And now there's a fight for whatever that is, but there's not a lot of professional ways that these individuals can build their voice. And so we're actually replicating, does any of you subscribe to Medium, the newsletter? It's kind of like a lifestyle across a whole bunch of topics. You pay, and then there's basically an authorship route where it's people who aren't necessarily book writers, but they have a means to authorship. And we believe the same thing is needed for this level of, like, they want to share their voice. And so we're building a Leadify accelerator program, of which then allows authorship into this currently app. And so we retooled Buildfire. We own the code, which is awesome. We have some tech people now. We never really had tech people before at Blanchard. It's not a big team. It's not like we invested, a ton of money into it. And so we are doing people power. And so again, you can scan this. You can go to leadify.app and download it. But this is our experiment that we don't exactly know what we're going to do with yet. We might spin it off and give it to the Blanchard Institute, which is our nonprofits arm, as a way to increase their value proposition. We do student self-leadership, which is a collaborative online program that Blanchard offers for free. Intrepid donates their platform for free. We deliver for free as a part of our corporate social responsibility, as a way to give back. And that was Margie Blanchard's vision. So with Leadify, it has been a bit of an experiment. It's been fun. And it's been really fun to let a team of people that are led by millennials create something that's by them for them. And I'm guessing it's going to work because I don't know what I'm talking about. And they do. So that's kind of where I got to with Blanchard. So kind of one of the things Scott asked was, what do we need to do about it? And so like really quickly, and what I kind of mentioned in the beginning is, if anything, when I think about the shift for leadership development, which all of you as performance improvement professionals likely do naturally, but it's who are you solving for? And then what's our perspective on that? I think still in leadership development companies, that still lacks. It's still content first. And so it's continually reinforcing a people first. So much so where we're helping our clients, and we're actually like being really explicit to say, this is what content first or content centric, stuff centric is versus human centric. How can we change your request? You're asking us for virtual training. Are you sure that's what you want? Let's make sure we have a human-centric problem statement so we're solving a real problem. Because maybe you don't need a virtual session. Maybe you just need a job aid. And so that's been, and with clients who move towards our enterprise and our content licensing, it makes it so much easier to have those conversations. Because then we can leverage our content to build a job aid versus selling them training, which they may or may not need. So for us, those kind of three key things: audience, whether it's segments or personas, the experience design, again, way different than 5 years ago at Blanchard, and then a measurement of success. That's been, I think, a really awesome evolution as well. And I think if Jim Irvine was here, you could probably jam for another hour. But templatizing measurement so that it becomes a little bit more actionable inside our organization. We're not having to recreate the wheel every time. And I would still say too, that's a challenge because we can't always coalesce data together unless they're in like a public workshop. So we still have a lot of decentralized data across clients, and it's becoming even harder because we're getting to a point where we're getting asked by our clients to anonymize data, or they're not getting allowed to have access to external systems. So we have our sort of LMS, sort of cohort delivery platform. So I will say that privacy and security issues we're facing, or questions we're getting asked, is making it harder to get data from our organizations, from our learners, unless it's managed by the organization itself. So that's probably a key one. Let's see. I won't go into segments. These are just sort of the tools that I said I would kind of give you. These are the questions that we make sure our teams ask. And sometimes they do it together in collaborative design, especially for those clients who want to have an end-to-end experience. And so you're going to see things that are built off of like the AGES framework. You're going to see things that are built off of 5 moments of need. So these questions that you're probably going to be super familiar with, but we do it in such a way where it's accessible, and then they can answer the question in a way that doesn't seem super scary. Because most of our, especially our smaller businesses, just because they're small doesn't mean they don't want elegant solutions too. Like they don't, like, some want it off the shelf and need it, and it's great because it's scale and it's quick and it's in multi-language and it works. But smaller organizations can have access to this too. And if we know where they're coming from, we can recommend the right learning journey template to help them get farther faster. We do this a lot with our clients who want to own the solution and build an empathy map to say, well, walk us through what it's like to get through your LMS. And then you see like lots of staff faces. And we're finding too, going back to credibility building, this is building credibility with our clients, not because we're solving it for them, but we're just highlighting the obvious. And then they're like, okay, let's use Blanchard Exchange. We're like, that's a smart idea. So for us, it's, again, value proposition selling. And again, one of my favorite tools is Scrumbler. It's like my favorite free tool. versus like some dumb like whiteboard thing that they're fun and they're nice, but this is like, let's do a quick say, do, think, feel exercise. And it's drag and drop and it meets like the lowest level of tech need ever. So interestingly, like, again, we have so many tools at our fingertips, but I would say like simpler, I find is way better, because it's far more accessible than a lot of like, okay, you're in a Miro board. I don't even know what that means. And where am I at? Why do I look like an elephant? I don't understand and I can't find it again. And whereas this, people can get in, do a virtual activity fast, and then move on with their day. And I take a screenshot and they're like, oh, that's all I need. So it's about simplifying, I find. And I also noticed too on the tech side, I still love having these tech partners, but going to AI and our AI partners, we are bullish on us using it as an organization to support productivity. It's totally changed our marketing department. Your question, Holly, I never answered. What sales tools do we use? We use Vala training. And we took all of the Ken Vala templates, so like the opportunity assessment and different sales research templates, and we built a GPT inside our instance. And so what happens now is a salesperson says, Donaldson Company out of Bloomington, Minnesota is a prospect of mine. Here's their website. Here's their website of their strategic priorities. Help me build a value proposition of Blanchard. Boom, email, boom, here's all the research. Boom, here's how all of Blanchard's frameworks match and that's done in about 60 seconds. So like prospecting, blown away. I feel like I'm getting dumber because I'm using it so much. So that's like a whole other side topic that we can have a fun dialogue on. And then the measurement piece. So I know I just like literally blew through like 40 slides and talked your ears off. And I just want to say, Scott, like what a privilege. Like, I don't think I've like shared this story end to end. So it was just fun to share. So thanks for just even like entertaining the notion of it.
You said the pendulum's shifting back now that people want face-to-face.
Mhm.
You showed lots of technology that's what people also want. So how are you meeting needs with technology and that face-to-face part?
Yeah, I would say that's been a challenge, especially from a staffing perspective. So we, afforded the shift from all face-to-face. We had like people on the road to no face-to-face. Then they got used to virtual. And then we're like, hey, go back on the road. And they're like, I don't want to go back. So for us, it's what we've been trying to do is trying to find the right mix of facilitators. I won't say coaches, facilitators who are virtual only, facilitators who are face-to-face only, and ones who like both. And interestingly, something that we're just getting to for staffing virtual sessions, especially off the shelf, is in the past and currently we talk to a client and they're like, well, what time do you want? And they're like, how about like 10:30 Central this day, 2:30 Central this day, and 5:30 Central this next week, or whatever it is. Like, so we're accommodating the client's schedule. That becomes an insane nightmare to have proper utilization of our staff, of which several members of those staff, a small amount, a fraction, are full-time employees. So last year was identifying who's full-time and who's day rate, contracted associate rate, and making sure, because what also happens is I love so-and-so, and we're like, but we have to pay so-and-so, and this person we already paid for full-time, so you got to use so-and-so. So last year was moving our customer success teams to primarily staff our, full-time employees first, then our top tier contracted, then our partners who I'm managing that part of the business right now, and having a priority staffing. So we has anyone used Elsie before, the virtual production company? That's who we use for all of our, so every time we do a class, virtual class, we have a facilitator and we have a producer. That's another piece. And we pay for that and our clients pay for that. So that's like when they say it's expensive, we're like, yeah, because we have 2 people and here's why. And then they say, no, we just want 1. And then they just have 1. And then they're like, oh, we get it. And then we have 2. And Elsie has a tool that we've licensed from them on staffing, and that's been fairly useful. And then we've brought that tool into our forecasting. So we're actually able to now forecast revenue off of it, which has been helpful. And our next iteration is standardizing off-the-shelf delivery times for our customers. So Blanchard is such an accommodating company. We're so nice. And that's caused a lot of other issues. Like we're like, yeah, we'll use your paper on legal documents. Yeah, pick a time that works best for you. So we're trying to elegantly find areas where, we don't have to be on, we use our own terms and our own term sheet, our own paper for contracts. Goes faster, a lot faster. Lisa's like, I know. And because sometimes too, we ask and then the client's like, I don't know, I guess use our paper. And we're like, okay. And then we're like, oh, wait, we just caused a whole bunch of problems. So sometimes too, it's almost being too tolerable or accommodating and putting those right boundaries in place and teaching our customer success teams that if you just say, hey, we have standard times that we offer off the shelf workshops, we're like, oh, okay. And then here's your options. So it's also helping our employees to be better advocates of the company. So like balancing customer centric versus employee centric and doing it in such a way where it can still be a win-win. So yeah, that's kind of the long answer to your short question. What's still challenging at Blanchard, if you're curious? It's figuring, like, if any of you are like compensation and commission experts, do you need a job? It has been, we have been a sales driven organization for 44 years. If you ask, like, and I'll say this jokingly, what does Blanchard do? Like, what are you in the business in? We're in the business of paying commissions and paying royalties. A lot of our frameworks have royalties on them still, and we pay commissions. Those are the 2 things that, like, if you ask how our systems have been designed, historically, they've been designed to pay commissions to our salespeople, and they've been designed to pay our authors royalties. So kind of off the top and off the bottom is kind of what comes out. And that's, that's a challenge because what for sales, what drives your behavior. And so it's trying to find that right balance for our selling teams, our customer success teams. For instance, we have new programs that are not selling. Is it because they're not good? No, but our salespeople can, they're not getting commissioned differently if they're selling program 1 versus program 2. And they know SL2 because they've been doing it for 20 years. So of course they're going to sell what they know. Or there's a new solution that came out, and this is like a really exciting, one of our Intrepid solutions just had a really, really big win. But Scott, like, it's taken 5 years for that to happen because sales, so it's also like, going back to maybe even Holly, your question of who's selling, even our solution architects, like they still have to go through the gatekeeper of sales, right? So it's our seller who has the relationship with the client. Where at my previous company, I can just call the client and be like, hey, I have this awesome thing that I think you'd love. So at Blanchard, which we have so many clients and named accounts, that's been challenging. And I think it's probably driven some slower adoption of solutions that might have gone faster in other organizations, but then other organizations that don't have sales have then, it's a trade-off. So our newest challenge is brand. And so we actually hired our first CMO last year. And she's awesome. And it's solving that of how do we outreach to a new audience who's never heard of Blanchard before. And we don't have the raving SL2 fan who read the book and who met Ken once. And we still have that, and we love that, and it's amazing, but it's less and less of that. So still so much more to do. And we're small. We're not like super massive. Like we're not like this, we're like 300 people plus our partner network. So
What have you tried in the last 5 years that didn't work? Your slide deck was all these grand successes, but
oh gosh, the VR thing didn't really work. It was really hard to build. It's the model of like building something with a partner has not been super successful. Like, let's co-build this together and then try to find a working model. It's very hard. I'd much rather just pay them and then I can white label it. Or give them a model where like I'll use one, and I won't say the name of the organization, but they're in the simulation type business. And we kind of said, let's go and build this together. And we did. And they thought we were going to sell it for them. And then we thought they were going to sell it for us. So that one didn't work out so well. Another thing that so like partnerships is an interesting nut for Blanchard to crack. That's the part of the business that I'm owning right now. And so I'm just like really diving in to say, what kind of partners do we have? What's our ideal partner? What does that mean at Blanchard? So that's kind of our next, like, we think that's a growth area of having really good partners and coalitions, whether it's with coaches who go through our certification program, which is like an ICF CEU program, and then they get a coaching toolkit, and then they can coach their clients, or with training program or like delivery companies that want to like augment their solutions, especially ones that like already know things like DISC and are like have various assessments, so they understand the content game. We don't have to convince them why you don't want to build your own stuff. But then for companies who build their own stuff, like custom firms, when they get a leadership development request, could they license Blanchard content? Because it would get them to market a lot faster and just build the custom pieces that make sense for the client. So that's kind of an area I kind of want to experiment with. So that's been that, like, partnerships has not worked as well. Like we did a partnership with Degreed, and again, Degreed didn't sell our stuff. We didn't sell their stuff. We didn't, I will say though, we had all of our free stuff on there, and that's probably our top refer to our website, believe it or not. So, it works in a different way. I would say another thing that hasn't worked is again, like what's how do we embed new solutions into our organization faster? Like this has been 5 years and we're still on a journey. So that like our rate of adoption inside of our customers, in my personal opinion, is still slow. In part,
this has all been kind of therapeutic. Thank you.
how so, Lisa? What do you mean?
Just like some of the things you said are hard. It's like, oh, good. I'm not the only one that spent 20 years thinking these things are hard.
It is, and our business is complex. And I think when we see, whether it's competitors or even our clients sort of oversimplify it, or partners, we'll be like, okay, well, have fun, good luck, let us know how that goes. Or go hire an instructional designer and a content developer and a video creator and a measurement specialist and a performance consultant, and see how much money you spend on that. And, like, we wish you the best. So it's interesting to see the like buy content, build content trajectory that we're on.
Brittany, I think thanks for this. It's a very engaging approach, and especially the human-centric thing I think is very appropriate for the world today. But here's my hard issue for you. It's not just your issue. Throughout my career, I've seen a lot of what I characterize as leadership development entropy. People come out of the leadership programs, whether they're yours or Covey's or any of the other homegrown ones, the employees tend to love them.
Yep.
I think the reason they love them is because when they go back to their work, their managers don't behave like the leadership development says they should be behaving.
Yeah.
And so I see that. Oh, I've seen that over and over, and my colleagues have told me that. So how do you conceptualize that? What can you tell your clients that they have to do to make it really work in the long term for their organizations?
It's, Varun, it's such a good question. The clients I see that garner the best results, they bake it in, right? It's kind of like what Holly said, like, it's not just like this is a leadership development program. This is our language of performance. So it's like for SL2, it's making it their sales framework model for how they assess performance for their sellers. Are you at D1, D2, D3, D4 at a variety of tasks? And so when we see clients who are able to go outside of the L&D sphere and bake it into their processes, that becomes much more powerful. If we see, again, role modeled from the top. So in a lot of engagements, we'll actually like give executive coaching for free to the sponsor and help build their, like in a one-on-one safe way, help build their skill set and develop their mindset in a way where, like, if you want this to happen, here's the human side of change management. It's not just a training course. It's our language of the human side of change, or how we have conversations at work. And so do we still deliver programs and it's a one and done? You bet. Because that's what our customers ask for, and we deliver it, and we say, are you sure? Do you want to see something a little bit deeper? And they'll say no, and we'll say, okay. But when we see the clients who are like, we actually want to have this become a part of our strategic framework. But I'd say it's a percentage of, it's not every client.
Yeah, I've tried to build it into some of the into our leadership business plan, some of the elements in it in terms of what they're expecting in the workforce. I put it aligned it with the employee survey content to see if what's being taught is showing up in what employees report they're seeing in the organization. There's so many points of failure through that process. It's really difficult. Yeah.
I actually recommend, and I think it's counterintuitive to like our sales team, but sometimes less is more. It's not like, hey, let's shove like 50 frameworks. If I saw all 16 frameworks inside of a company, I mean, yeah, there's licensing deals, but like for one audience, I'd be like, dude, pick like 3. If I had to pick 3, you pick building trust because you have a foundational relationship. You use SL2, and then one more on the back end, whether it's like difficult conversations or but it's like, it's really targeted towards need versus like, here's a smattering of everything, and we want you to be experts in all these things. So dumb.
So I know Brittany for a long time, and she's, besides always being, 110% into their job, she always has some great special project or book or flashcards or something she's been working on. So what's your latest one you've built that isn't for Blanchard, that you just build for yourself? You enjoy it.
My little startup is called Bolster Leadership. My bestie, Lisa, she used to work for Target and Cargill. She has her PhD in appreciative inquiry, and she and her husband is like a famous board game designer. And so the 3 of us built leadership, like conversational cards that build leadership capability. And honestly, it's probably been the best learning experience because it helped me learn supply chain. It helped me learn printing. It helped me learn e-commerce and the funnel of hell that it is to like have something be seen on social media. And also all that I learned, I was able to bring to Blanchard to say, before we go into marketing to individual contributors, here's what we need to think about, and here's how much money we need in order to do it. So it's been, I mean, one, it's been super transferable, and I just sold it. So I can have more time with my family and, you know, and do my job and do awesome at my job, and hopefully continue to have Blanchard grow and be, but also like, it was like ruthless prioritization. Like what can I say goodbye to? So Lisa's going to turn it into a services business.
Great. Thanks for that. Thanks for that update. So you're nothing in 2025, not a new one you're going to take over now that you have.
I don't know. I'm going to write a book one day, but I need to get some of my kids. I have like five. I have a, between my partner and I, we have an 18, a 16, a 15, a 14, and a 12-year-old. So like, let's get one of them off to college, maybe.
Any other questions for Britney? And you can connect with her on LinkedIn and through any other ways. She's you know, has a great, huge network and such. But any other questions for Britney? You have one, Holly?
Well, I mean, this is a heavily loaded question, so it's probably going to be hard to deal with in 2 or 3 minutes, but maybe we could just chat offline. I'm just curious, you've probably been well aware of a lot of reports about leadership development overall, kind of going to the earlier comment, being broken, and you know, talking earlier about the importance of context versus content. The context in which leaders are having to perform and today's work world has changed.
Oh, she had such a good question and she froze.
Holly froze.
Oh, Holly, what's the rest of your question?
I know. I'm like, what's
Coming back in 10, 9, 8.
shoot.
Let's guess the end of her question.
Hmm.
I'm not sure what the question was. She was going to kind of what Brooklyn was talking about, you know, this,
Broken and leaders face different challenges today. So how do you help them? Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I would say like, I feel there's also like a focus on the basics. Like we might overcomplicate. And I think some technology to like that VR simulation, yeah, it's fine. But like, could I have just done that with like a little role play exercise, or could I have done that with, you know, something more simple? Absolutely. Would I do it again? Yes, because it gave a checkbox on the list, which allowed us to be down selected for XYZ customer. Because again, our buyers are disconnected to what our learners want. So there's some performative things that like I believe that we did because it was performative, and I'm fine with that, and I'll own that. But I just think like less is more sometimes, and maybe that's like maybe what she was getting at. Like if I can have them do one thing really well, or like I think about my daughter who's 16, if I can have her go have a conversation where she can share candor and ask questions elegantly in the same conversation, that's a win.
all right, finish your question. Holly's back.
Yeah,
What's the question?
Quickly, yeah. Quickly, I was just wondering how Blanchard and your team has been experiencing the whole notion of burnout with managers and leadership in general, and if that goes into part of your consulting approach when you assess whether a program or a product is appropriate at any given time for a client. Is that part of your?
I mean, yeah. So it's interesting because I think what we get, I'll dial back, but like there's a lot of questions or like requests we get. Do you have content on burnout? Do you have content on return to office? Do you have content on like almost like content of stuff in context?
Right.
And we are trying to not do a lot of that, or it becomes a part of the things they build. Those like those pieces that are like low end design, toolkit scenarios. I mean, I will say like we hear it all the time. I will say Blanchard feels that way. If you had any Blanchard manager on the phone or Blanchard employee, they were like, there's too much change. I am burnt out. There's too much going on. I'm getting asked to do more. You know, and I think AI is helping kind of in some ways, but not in other ways, because then you
Right.
start to see more productivity and they're like, oh, you can do that. Well, and I'm going to give you more. So it's like this means of stacking. So as you were kind of coming back on, like our solution architects are promoting a less is more approach. Like, how about
Right.
you know, again, getting people together in person has actually afforded that a little bit, because people, when they get together, they're focusing more on connection building as
Right.
opposed to teaching. So it's segmenting, where does the teaching moment go? Where does the connection moment go? Where does the practice moment go? I will say the practice moment continues to get pushed off until after the experience. And we don't see a ton of great traction in tools that like manage the practice piece, like tools like Bongo, which sound awesome. Like, here's your video role play. So again, another tool that like makes sense when you see it, but in practice doesn't get the adoption that you would hope it would. So the practice piece still stymies me. Although I will say I use my enterprise version of ChatGPT as my therapist. And I ask it what to say when I really get upset with my daughters or my whoever or my employees, and it tells me things to say. So I'm also like, as I'm a guinea pig myself, I'm like, how does getting this content, here's my prompts, but then I still go have the conversation. So I do think that there's a place for AI to replace some of the teaching moments, but doesn't replace the practice moment.
Now,
I know
like
that didn't answer your
chatbot,
question, but
chatbots will really mushroom. You know, Marshall Goldsmith put himself as a chatbot, and managers typically want point solutions. Oh my God, I have a difficult employee I've got to have a conversation with. What should I do?
you are so spot on. It's push versus pull. Like a partner said, hey, I have this awesome AI program. We should build SL2 on this. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. And I'm in the demo of it, and I have answered their question 0 times, because those are not the questions I'm asking at that moment. So there's a big difference of push. It's why a lot of like AI coaching platforms have failed, like Wave.ai, there's like a bevy others, because it's exactly that. It's they want it now, and then they can go do something with it when they're ready. So it's a different, it's not nudges. Like, yeah, I want reminders, go into your thing and go finish your course, whatever. But the stuff in the moments, like if, you know, anyway, maybe that's it, Scott. What am I thinking about? It's what's our perspective on AI that's actually gonna like be meaningful, and not like I'm trying to monetize it overnight, which is why we haven't done it, and why I'm offering Leadify for free, because
Again, thanks again. We're at our time. Thanks for the interaction and the questions and sharing, you know, your journey and hitting on some of the key points that we all need to remember. And I think the key thing is that human connection is still important. It's not going to be replaced by technology, and driving towards to that, and always be thinking about our solutions in that design thinking person first rather than content first. I think that's a key thing that if we need to hear that so many times. For everybody, we'll send out the deck and the recording tomorrow. And thanks again for taking the time to do this, Brittany.
thanks, Scott.
Thanks,
Have a great
Brittany.
night, guys.
Thank
Bye.
you. Great presentation.
Yeah, thank
Oh,
you. Very
thanks.
nice.
See ya.
Bye.